Hello, everyone. I'm Anthony Gonzalez, the program coordinator here at the Higher Education Center for Alcohol and Drug Misuse Prevention and Recovery. I hope everyone is staying well out there, and I want to thank you all for joining us today for our webinar session titled Vaping Their Brains, E-Cigarettes and the College Community, featuring Dr. Rob Crane and Amanda Swenson Turner. We have a few housekeeping slides that we'd like to go over. We've switched to Zoom as our broadcasting platform, and we're excited about the switch and believe this will provide a better user experience. If I can direct your attention to the bottom of your screen, this is where you'll be able to submit your questions for our presenter. We welcome all of your questions, and please feel free to submit them at any time throughout this session. We will field the received questions to our presenter at the very end. And please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. As I mentioned earlier, please feel free to share who you are and where you're joining us from. We also encourage you to learn more about becoming a member of the Higher Education Center, which includes access to our Screen U program. Screen U is a web-based screening and brief intervention referral to treatment program. We've launched a new demo of the program, so we encourage you to take a look. You can do so by searching go.osu.edu/screenudemo for access. And of course, you can learn more about the benefits of becoming a member by visiting our website at hecaod.osu.edu. And with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce you our presenters for today. Joining us, we have Dr. Rob Crane and Amanda Swenson Turner. Dr. Rob Crane is a clinical professor of family medicine at The Ohio State University and is the founder and president of Preventing Tobacco Addiction Foundation. Joining him is Amanda Swenson Turner, the executive director of the Prevention Tobacco Addiction Foundation. Thank you both for joining us, and it's my pleasure turning it over to you at this time.
Great, thank you, and hello everybody. We are honored to be with you this afternoon and thankful for your participation in this important topic. Today, our goals are to share with you a bit about our organization, why and what we do. Then Dr. Rob Crane will be going into detail about the dangers of nicotine specific to electronic cigarettes. Then we are hoping to arm you with some ideas on what you can do back in your communities and college campuses to help us prevent addiction to nicotine. So we are the Preventing Tobacco Addiction Foundation, also known as Tobacco 21. We were established in 1996 with the mission to reduce the health and economic impact of tobacco use and nicotine addiction through education, advocacy, and policy change. So what does that mean? We work across the country to introduce sound legislation that works to help prevent kids from initiating the use of tobacco products. So we are looking to prevent the access and use to tobacco. These are policies that aim to limit the tobacco industry's access to kids. And I should pause and clarify that when I say tobacco industry, that includes all tobacco products, combustible cigarettes, cigars, and electronic cigarettes, or vaping as it is widely known. I think it's also important for all of you to understand personally why we do what we do. Like many of you, there was probably something that happened in your life that inspired you in the work in your careers. So I'd quickly like to share our personal stories and why we engage in this work. I'm originally from the Carolinas, and my grandfather was a tobacco farmer in South Carolina back when it was un-American to not smoke. Thankfully, my father, who worked on the farms, never picked up the habit, but unfortunately my grandfather did and struggled to quit even after he got lung cancer, which ultimately took his life. Rob Crane, his father, as he says, was a Mark Twain smoker. Mark Twain famously said, "Giving up smoking is the easiest thing in the world. I know because I've done it 1,000 times." And unfortunately, like my grandfather, Rob's father also got lung cancer and passed away from that terrible illness. So I think you could say we are both trying to do good out of these tragic losses and help ensure others don't succumb to an early death due to nicotine addiction. So I know I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I just want to remind everybody so you are better armed against the naysayers. So I just want to run through quickly what the dangers are of nicotine and tobacco. Smoking is responsible for 1 in 5 of all deaths in the United States, 1 in 5. There's also data that examines nicotine's role as a gateway to the abuse of other substances and a potential trigger for serious mental illness and those that are susceptible to mental illness. And many forget that tobacco is the leading cause of preventable disease, disability, and death in the United States. So let's put some numbers to that. Smoking and secondhand smoking kills more than 500,000 Americans a year. And when I say kill, we mean that it takes 10 years off of a normal lifespan. So looking at the comparisons of loss of life in these other events, I ask you, do you think the effort of your health department commiserate with the magnitude of this issue? I'm guessing not. So I'm going to give you a little bit more understanding of the magnitude of these numbers. Again, 500,000 Americans a year die from smoking. That equates to at least 3 fully loaded 747 airplanes crashing every day. So imagine if an airplane crashed at JFK this morning, and then another one this afternoon, and then another one tonight. Planes would be grounded and most would stop flying. And don't worry, I know this analogy is a little confusing given we are in the midst of a pandemic and not many people are traveling, but I think you get my point. It's also known that smoking while pregnant is terrible for the fetus as well as for the mother, not to mention the dangers of secondhand smoking once the baby is born. According to a study by the Institute of Medicine that examined the public health implications of raising the minimum age for purchasing tobacco products to 21, amongst the many benefits that they shared doing so, they included that this policy change would help reduce pregnancy complications, including infant mortality rates. This is important to note because many women give birth in their early 20s. So why raise the age? Well, 95% of current smokers started before the age of 21. And having a cigarette by the age of 18 makes it twice as likely to become a lifelong smoker. I've personally heard countless stories of folks telling me that they started as early as 14 years old and could easily buy tobacco products from the store down the street from them, claiming it was for their parents. Later on, Rob will go into more detail about the vulnerability of the brain during these formative years and the effects nicotine has on it. And as you see, 1 in 3 students have vaped in the past month. So if we were all in a room right now together, I would have you all look to the person on your right and the person on your left and make you decide, of the 3 of you, which one of you has a high schooler that vaped this month. So raising the age from 18 to 21 also removes the access to the under 18 social circle. 18-year-olds and some 19-year-olds are in class and ride the bus with 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. You remove that access, you remove the chances of them starting at a young age. So how do we do this? Well, as you can imagine, the tobacco industry is enormous and well-resourced. So we can't do this alone. We have partners across the country that we work with through coalitions because that is the most effective way to get good policies passed. And so we value these partners, including the American Lung Association, American Heart Association, American Cancer Society, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, and other organizations like Kaiser Permanente and the American Veterans. In fact, a year ago, some 15 partner organizations collaborated on what is known as the Model Tobacco 21 policy. This is a policy that has been used in dozens of states and cities to guide legislators on writing best practices for Tobacco 21 laws. And if you want to get to the weeds about Tobacco 21 and look at the policy, the model policy, you can find it on our website at tobacco21.org. So now I want to take you on a bit of a journey sharing the progression of Tobacco 21. And we're going to go all the way back to 2005, 15 years ago, in a little town called Needham, Massachusetts. This is a western suburb of Boston, and their city council decided in 2005 to raise the tobacco sales age to 21. And this didn't happen overnight. This was years of work that they decided to do. So initially, no one really thought this would be effective policy because you can literally cross the street to another town where they are selling tobacco to kids under the age of 21. However, an HMO did a study of the 20 towns west of Boston, and they found some shocking results. And this was a basic study looking at various social issues in high school, sex, drugs, rock and roll, you name it. But what jumped from the page was that there was a steep decline of smoking after Tobacco 21 was passed. The high school smoking rate dropped by half. So the policy proved to be effective, and we were off. So in 2005, we started with 1 city and 1 state under Tobacco 21. Then by 2013, thanks to Mayor Bloomberg and his hate for tobacco and love for statistics, New York City became the first major city to raise the age to 21. Then moving on to 2014, Hawaii County and several other cities began to pass Tobacco 21. By 2015, Hawaii became the first state to pass statewide Tobacco 21. And unfortunately, I was not with the organization then, or else I would have firsthand saw this policy through on the ground in Hawaii. Then in 2016, California became the second state to pass Tobacco 21, in addition to many other major cities across the country, including Washington, D.C. So as you can see, this policy took off, and mostly because there was a new epidemic on the rise, and that was the vaping epidemic. And by 2018, the entire state of Massachusetts raised the age to 21. And I will note that today, Massachusetts is the only state that has a flavor ban. So in 2018, the fall of 2018, former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb declared youth vaping as an epidemic. Millions of kids were already addicted to nicotine through e-cigarettes, specifically through Juul. The media reported almost daily about the dangers of vaping, and by the time the legislative sessions opened in early 2019, Juul and Big Tobacco knew they had to publicly support policy efforts that looked like they were trying to keep away their products from youth. This is all despite knowing that Juul and Big Tobacco specifically targeted and addicting youth to cigarettes and vaping products. Juul likes to say they are an alternative, a safe alternative to cigarettes, but if that was true, why would Altria, the maker of Marlboro, invest $12.8 billion for a 35% stake in Juul? So in 2019, the publicity stunt by Juul and Big Tobacco began as they publicly supported Tobacco 21 policies in state houses across the country. They deployed dozens of lobbyists to make their case for Tobacco 21. The problem was these were extremely weak Tobacco 21 policies without any enforcement, which they knew. That was part of their tactic. They knew without enforcement, they would not be effective in actually preventing youth initiation to nicotine. But that didn't matter. This was a move to make them look like they were doing good after facing massive scrutiny for blatantly marketing kids. So since then, our organization, all of our partners have been working across the country, battling the tobacco industry and state houses and pushing for strong Tobacco 21 laws that will actually have a positive effect on youth not using tobacco products. So like all policy, the devil is in the details. You can raise the sales age to 51 years old if you like, but if there's no enforcement or accountability placed on the retailers who make a profit from selling these products, it simply just doesn't matter. So on December 20th, 2019, as part of the federal spending bill, President Trump signed into law the Federal Tobacco 21 law, raising the sales age across the country from 18 to 21. So as of today, Tobacco 21 is the law of the land. And before you applaud us and pop champagne, there are several things that you need to note. First, this was an effort backed by Big Tobacco. So remember, the devil is in the details. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into the weeds of this legislation, but I did want to pop up here so you can reference it later, some high-level points around the Federal Tobacco 21 law. There's a couple good things on here that we'd like to note. The bill does not exempt the military, which is something the military actually advocated for. They want their soldiers combat ready, not addicted to nicotine. There's no phase-in age restrictions, also known as grandfathering, so the bill was effective immediately. And the law does not preempt cities, counties, or states, meaning that local governments can still strengthen their own tobacco control laws protecting their communities. And although this law went into effect immediately, the FDA was given about 9 months to finalize rules for enforcement. However, considering we are still in the COVID-19 pandemic, they have been a bit slow to making this a priority. Also, some states feel that they are unable to enforce federal Tobacco 21 laws without changing their own state law. So bottom line, our work with Tobacco 21 is not done, and we continue to work across the country to pass and strengthen statewide Tobacco 21 laws. Something else you may be scratching your head about is thinking, wait, I had heard the FDA banned flavored tobacco products, and I think Juul, they also stopped selling their flavored tobacco products. Well, that is true, but with the FDA's ban on flavors, there are many loopholes. The biggest ones being that they did not ban menthol flavors, which is derived from mint. It's a flavor and a product that many flavor users easily switch to. And the ban only limited flavors to closed pod e-cigarettes. So that is what you see with a Juul device, a closed pod e-cigarette device. However, the ban exempted disposable devices and open system refillable devices. To fully protect youth, all flavors and all products must be banned. The claim that flavors help adults quit using regular cigarettes has never been proven, and we know that flavors hook kids. Not to mention, menthol has historically been marketed to the African American community, which has caused disproportionately negative health effects in that community. So we are in a game of whack-a-mole. You ban one kind of tobacco use and leave loopholes. This very clever, well-funded industry will always find another way to dispense their product. So I want you to meet the new kid on the block, Puff Bar. This is that single-use device I was speaking to that was not exempt, that was exempted from the FDA flavor ban. Puff bars and similar devices are easily available for purchase online in flavors like watermelon, sour apple, peach ice, and pineapple lemonade. So in the 8 months between July 2019 and March 2020, during which Juul suspended sales of some flavors before the partial federal ban took effect in February of this year, the use of Juul devices declined. However, the use of products like Puff bars and other alternative products that were allowed to sell flavors, they doubled in sales. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rob, who will go into more detail about e-cigarettes.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to be talking with you. And it's a hot day in Ohio, and I hope you're experiencing a nice summer despite the COVID. A reminder, of course, that even despite our very difficult time now with the COVID epidemic and deaths from it, nicotine and tobacco are going to control or kill 3 times as many people this year as will any COVID illness. That's a little bit about what we've been doing. Of course, now I want to talk about a focus on the e-cigarette and what you will need to be doing if we're going to help to counter this particular epidemic. First, the e-cigarette. I think most of you know the e-cigarette arose about 10 years ago in China and has slowly made its way, not slowly anymore, over to the United States. It consists of a repository of propylene glycol or glycerin into which nicotine and flavoring is put. And then there is a battery-driven heating element, which is controlled by a small computer chip that activates on inhalation. And that raises the temperature in that heating element to about 600 degrees Fahrenheit and creates a vapor product that the user then inhales. There are early cigarettes, the first generation were e-cigarettes, were called cigalikes. They looked a lot like cigarettes. And I think the idea was, of course, to make them kind of be replacements for cigarettes. Because cigarettes have such a bad name, that thought didn't last very long. There was a movement toward separating themselves from cigarettes. And we got the second generation, which don't look at all like cigarettes, but still function the same way. A few years after that came along the mod, the third generation in the middle here. And this was a much larger reservoir. And the beauty of it, from a user's point of view, was that you could adjust the voltage and the volume. So you could turn the voltage way up, increasing the heat and making the particles smaller and more vaporous. You could increase the volume and make a larger smoke volume, so people would actually have cloud chasing contests with large clouds of smoke. And the mod was very popular. But even that began to fade. And it wasn't until Juul came along in 2015, and they developed this pod system that I'm sure you're all familiar with, where they have on the right-hand side, you can see here in blue, a small reservoir of nicotine glycerol flavors that you plug into your battery and can inhale from there. And that particular pod is about a pack or a pack and a half worth of cigarette nicotine and enables the person to then discard that, usually on the side of the road, and move on. As Amanda mentioned, because of the FDA's ruling against certain kinds of flavors in Juul pods, there's now a 5th generation, and that's the entirely disposable issue of Puff Bar. And Puff Bar is one of many products that utilize the same system, but you can throw away the entire thing, and therefore they are exempted from the flavor ban, and you'll see that they have capitalized on that exemption. So the vaping folks, the e-cigarette folks, the promoters and sellers of same, they will tell you that, of course, the major role for e-cigarettes is to promote adult cessation from combustible tobacco products. That, of course, is not entirely true. They have a small group of combustible users who have switched to e-cigarettes, but the data is still out. The jury is still out about whether or not e-cigarette use will help or hinder adult cessation. Perhaps 3% of adult users of cigarettes are switching to e-cigarettes, maybe 500,000 people a year. But the problem, of course, is that so many kids have initiated. So the balance looks a lot more like this. This is a Brian King, Dr. Brian King from the CDC slide that I've stolen. And I remind people that with 10 million kids, that's 500,000 kids under 18, another 500,000 young adults and older adolescents over 18, initiating to Juul and other Juul-like drugs and devices. The balance is clearly out of balance. If there's one slide I'd like you to kind of set to memory, it's this one. And it's a reminder of how far we've come and how far we've passed over the good part to a bad area of addiction again. I've been around doing this for over 20 years now. And back in the late 90s, we had youth smoking at about 1/3 of all high school students who were using cigarettes. That has come down gradually and slowly. You see very sustainably over the last 20 years. We've been moving that down with a regular, easy basis, and it's clearly made a difference in how kids approach and think about cigarettes. We've persuaded almost all high school students that smoking cigarettes is gross, stupid, and unhealthy, and that they don't want to be involved in it. And then along come e-cigarettes. You see in 2011, there was initiation, a gradual increase to a peak, and then e-cigarettes began to lose their mojo, very much like fidget spinners or hoverboards or hula hoops. Kids lose their passion for a particular fad, and it was going away until Juul hit in 2015. And all of a sudden you can see what happens now. So in a period of 5 years, we have lost almost 20 years of progress in reducing nicotine addiction. I want you to look at where 2018 would be on this slide. It's about 24, 25%. The reason I ask you to bring that up is I'm going to the next slide because this is 12th graders, but you're really concerned about freshmen in high school. And you can, freshmen in college. And you can see this is Ohio State, a survey done first in 2016 and then moved to 2018, looking at both freshmen and juniors and looking at all e-cigarettes and then just Juul alone. And you can see the profound nature of the epidemic. And remember, this is 2018, so there was still another 20 or 30% in growth, which is not reflected on this slide, that you have seen on your campuses. An epidemic of amazing proportion that has implications well beyond the e-cigarettes. So why do kids get started? And I think most of you know this. There has been a dramatic rise in advertising. And of course, most of us don't see that because it's on social media and the internet. It's directed specifically at kids. It's incredibly effective. They found a way to get into Facebook and Instagram and a whole variety of other things, from Snapchat to Pinterest to you bet, that have influenced kids to think about using e-cigarettes and to see how much fun it would be to be in the crowd who is using them. Once they get to be thinking about it, it is indeed flavors which drive them to try. This is again is a Brian King slide from the CDC, and it reminds us that flavors play such an important role in that initiation step. And that's why there's been a nationwide attempt to reduce flavors, very much like the tobacco 21 epidemic has been addressed locally with grassroots efforts from city to city and county to county, which we were very successful. That same strategy has been adopted for flavors, and you'll see it coming to your community soon to try to restrict e-cigarette and regular cigarette flavors from going forward. And finally, what keeps the kid in the swamp, as it were, is nicotine. Unlike fidget spinners or hoverboards, they're not addictive per se, and it's nicotine which makes that fad persist. The good thing about these three things is it provides us with an opportunity at each level to reduce kids' use. The FDA has begun to reduce advertising, especially that has youthful appeal, and that's been one way to reduce youth usage. Flavors are the next, and you'll see, as I talked about, reductions in flavors through flavor bans at the state and local level, also the federal level, but it's not gone far enough. Unfortunately, the FDA has preempted, and the federal government has preempted local governments and state governments from actually addressing ingredients. They can only address flavors which are substantially apparent in the substance itself. So if you can smell or taste chocolate or licorice or menthol and can name it so, that's banned. But almost all cigarettes and almost all tobacco products have a mixture of flavors in there to enhance the product and to reduce the bitter taste of nicotine. So flavors at all levels need to be addressed. And then finally, nicotine itself. Juul's real advance was not just their beautiful design and advertising, but they actually changed the way nicotine was presented by putting it with benzoic acid to make it a nicotine salt. And we'll talk more about that later. So here's advertising. This is the early advertising for e-cigarettes. And you can see they went back to the old tobacco playbook of sex and celebrities. And then, of course, what kids really want is to be cool. And so you've got cosmic fog here. But Juul changed the playbook. They went directly after kids. And how they did that was to project that sense of mature fun for kids. Kids don't want to be adults. They want to be grown-up kids. And that's exactly what Juul presented. And they did an amazing job. One of the most spectacular marketing jobs ever done by any industry, and did it kind of below the level of acknowledgement by adults because it was all done on social media. Here you can see Be Core, where you can be cool, and they gave out samples of Juul everywhere and had these launch parties that had celebrities and music and you name it. They even stole Ariana Grande's kind of signature iconic stance here in their vaporized thing, and they were extremely effective. Now, they were also advertising clearly to kids, and both the FDA and many states' attorneys generals have come after them for that, and they're being sued at many levels because this is a clear attempt to get kids involved in their product, and that is against the law. For that reason, the new kid on the block, the fifth generation, the Puff Bar, doesn't appeal directly to kids with pictures of kids, But I ask you, is this the kind of advertisement that's going to appeal to a 40-year-old smoker trying to quit, or the 14-year-old who's thinking about trying? I think that is indisputable. Now, at the last part of my talk, I want to delve into nicotine itself. There is this sense among many that nicotine is really not a problem. Nicotine is kind of like caffeine. And the real problem with a cigarette, of course, are the other 4,000 chemicals. Nicotine's benign. Nothing could be further from the truth. We're going to talk a little bit about why nicotine is so addictive and it is so challenging for the adolescent brain. This is a molecule, of course, and I might ask you, you can't really respond, why do you think the tobacco plant makes this molecule? Unique to tobacco? Well, not really unique. There are other plants have it as well, including tomatoes, but not in the same quantity. They make it, of course, because it's a very potent insecticide. Now, you may ask yourself, what's it do to the grasshopper or other insect? Nicotine has the exact same effect on the grasshopper that it does on a human. We have simply learned to titrate the dose a little better so as not to kill ourselves immediately. That effect is to release another neurotransmitter in the brain, and that is dopamine. A moment about dopamine. This is the master neurotransmitter. When there's release of dopamine in the brain, you feel relaxed, focused. There's a deep sense of pleasure. Hunger and thirst are diminished, as are other kind of negative emotions. Relaxation and pleasure abound. It is a great feeling. So that's why nicotine works, to make us feel better if we're a smoker. It releases dopamine, and it does so in a very important part of the brain, the deepest, most ancient parts of the brain, in what was now typically called the limbic system. If you think about your brain dividing into a couple of parts, the limbic system is the older part of the brain where basic desire lives, hunger and thirst and lust and anger, fear, all these things that motivate us, some good, some bad, live in this deep part of the brain. The darker part here you're looking at, that's the cognitive part, thoughtful, rational part. But nicotine pretty much exclusively works in the deep, ancient part of the brain. In fact, we sometimes call that the reptilian part of the brain. And there's actually very good ecological, epidemiological evidence that T-Rex indeed use the same dopamine system that we use today in our brains. But this reptilian part of the brain, that's a powerful part. And if you mess with this part of the brain over and over and over with repeated doses, you change the brain. And messing with this part of the brain in an adolescent is fraught. So, nicotine delivery systems. As you can see here, the cigarette's a much better delivery system than anything we've devised as a nicotine replacement. It spikes up higher, there's more level of venous nicotine delivery. But this, of course, is not the story. Venous level is what's coming from the brain back to the heart. But what's going to the brain is the arterial system. And this is the beauty of the engineered cigarette. It is this tremendous spike in arterial nicotine delivered to the brain within seconds. You have to remember that the lung has millions of tiny air sacs. If you are to flatten those out, it's the same size as a singles tennis court. It's a beautiful, miraculous delivery system for oxygen and getting rid of carbon dioxide. Nicotine becomes the perfect hitchhiker. It comes along in the same speed that oxygen is delivered, so is nicotine. And that small molecule travels directly to the brain, and within 6 to 15 seconds, you get a full dose of nicotine. Compare that to intravenous injection, and that's 30 to 50 seconds. So it takes longer to get the full dose of nicotine intravenously than it does by inhaling. Inhaled nicotine is incredibly powerful. And when it hits those receptors in the brain at that level, it flips almost all of them and releases dopamine quickly. So if you are a vapor or a smoker, it's over and over and over and over again over the period of about 5 or 10 minutes as you complete your set of inhalations. This is what it looks like to the brain over a period of time. This is 12 cigarettes, but it's, about a half a pod of Juul every day, pounding that receptor over and over and over again. So what happens? First of all, the brain gets some dopamine and feels good. And it gets some dopamine again, it feels good. And then the brain tries to adjust. And so it ramps down the receptivity to all dopaminergic stimulation. Now, when you go out in the sunshine, there's dopamine stimulation. If you talk to a friend, there's dopamine stimulation. If you have something good to eat, dopamine. If you have sex, dopamine. If you go for exercise in the park, you get dopamine. But if nicotine is hitting those receptors over and over again and they're desensitized, then that walk in the park doesn't work anymore. Then friendship isn't so effective. Then something good to eat doesn't taste as well. Even sex is not as good when you're a smoker. And so the only thing which raises dopamine up again is another hit off the cigarette. The problem, of course, is that in most indoor spaces nowadays, you can't smoke. So if you're working or in school for hours at a time, those dopamine and nicotine levels fall off a cliff and you go into withdrawal. So that most smokers spend much of their time in withdrawal. And during that time, they're irritable. They're anxious. They're unfocused. We just studied Ohio State, which looked at smokers underemployment versus non-smokers, and found that employers spend an extra $5,800 a year to pay for a smoking employee versus a non-smoking employee. And quite a significant part of that was presenteeism. That is, the smoker was at his desk, but not able to work very well. What happens to kids? It's pretty clear. Much higher levels of substance abuse, but more than that, behavioral issues and mental health issues. Now you may say, of course, these are kids who take risks and therefore you're going to have more problems. But it's not entirely true. As we look at some of the long-term data, it appears that nicotine initiates much of this behavior, doesn't just mirror it. Why? Well, this is a Nobel Prize winning physiologist and his wife, who is a psychologist, published an article a few years ago in the New England Journal of Medicine explaining why nicotine is such a strong promoter of other substance use. If you think about what addiction is, it is profound memory. How does memory occur? If you are looking at this presentation now or looking outside at the window, you see things and experience things that are mostly chemical. Neurotransmitters rocketing around your brain, and they let you put together past memories with current visual fields and put it all together in a kind of a chemical milieu. But for you to remember this slide or what your friend told you 2 days ago, you have to actually change the architecture of your brain. Those synapses have to change and dendrites have to grow, and that is done in a very careful way. In the limbic system, the deep part of the brain, there's one particular chemical, delta phos-B, which helps that growth along. And what stimulates that the most is nicotine. Nicotine stimulating delta phos-B makes those growth of fibers in the limbic system, that short-circuiting of the cognitive function, profound. That's why nicotine is so effective. The reason I circled this is I think you'll see over the next 5 or 6 years, we're going to target delta phos-B, which may help us with addictive issues. So this is a smoking thing, but it also works as well for vaping. What we now know is that nicotine, especially inhaled nicotine, where you get this pounding in the receptors, changes the brain in a bad way and destabilizing affect. Why do 90% of alcoholics smoke? Why do 95% of schizophrenics smoke? The vast majority of people with bipolar disease, and a large proportion of people who have anxiety, ADHD, other debilitating mental illness. Part of it is they're trying to boost their dopamine back up, but part of it's the other direction, is that nicotine actually causes these problems and precipitates mental illness. We're doing this new thing, this new study about where we find the problem in the brain. It's a big problem with adolescents. It's a problem with people with addiction problems in general. Of course, this is the Sinai Peninsula at the top here. And this big river running down through the middle of Egypt is denial. And sometimes we have to deal with denial by taking the Aswan Dam, which is in Egypt, and putting the dam Aswan on denial when we talk with our adolescents and deal with their denial of what it's doing to them, what it's doing to their family and friends, and what it's doing to society as a whole. Putting the Aswan Dam on denial. Finally, I want to talk about nicotine salts. Nicotine salt is the invention of Juul, or at least they perfected it. This adding benzoic acid to nicotine to make it a lower pH. High pH nicotine in the form of a Marlboro is very harsh on the back of the throat. It delivers a lot of nicotine fast, but it's very harsh. What Juul did was they gave a lot of nicotine in their pods, 5 times what you would see in most vapor devices prior to this, but it was smooth and slow. I sometimes give the analogy that we've all heard about before. Oxycodone was the opiate that got a lot of people in trouble because it was easy to take. It came on slowly. It hooked people. It's certainly powerful as an addictive drug, but easy to use. Once that became less available or people became more addicted, they may move to heroin. And heroin is fast acting, really powerful. That's the punch that people get when they want to get high. Now, a lot of people move from OxyContin to heroin, but not many people move back the other direction. The same analogy can be said for Juul. Juul gives you a lot of nicotine, but it gives it to them more slowly. Now, if you look at the venous curve for a cigarette and for Juul is very similar, but the arterial curve, that punch, comes from Marlboro. Marlboro is the heroin of a nicotine delivery. I'm going to turn it back to Amanda to talk about where we're going and where you got to be thinking about heading yourself.
Thanks, Rob. So where are we now? Make sure I can advance. So as a reminder, Tobacco 21 is law of the land, but there is more to be done. To date, 28 states have signed into law a statewide Tobacco 21, and 4 states await signatures by their governors. So that leaves us with 18 states that still need to pass a statewide Tobacco 21 law. So where are there opportunities in policy work for tobacco control for youth prevention? Again, we are focused on prevention. At the Preventing Tobacco Addiction Foundation, we are particularly invested in enforcing the new sales age of 21 to ensure it works to protect our kids. And one of the most effective ways to do this is through licensing of tobacco retailers and doing compliance checks to make sure that these retailers are complying with the law. So there are 10 states right now that do not have a tobacco retail licensing. And so you may be thinking, wait, when I go get my hair done or my nails done, or when I buy alcohol, or I own a Christmas tree farm, you have to have a license for all of those things. Even some states, you have to have a license to own a dog. So does it make sense that you wouldn't have to have a license to sell a proven, deadly, addictive product like tobacco? No. And in addition to these 10 states that do not have a licensing program, there are many licensing programs that are very weak with no teeth, no enforcement. So to give you a little bit more perspective about why a licensing program and regulation and enforcement is important, the average convenience store that sells tobacco products They make about over $500,000 a year in tobacco sales. $500,000 a year. So imagine if you threaten to revoke their license to sell that product, you threaten to suspend that license. Do you think that retailers would finally start complying with the law? I'm guessing they would. We know that age of sales laws work and when they are enforced. So, speed limits, seat belts, alcohol, tobacco, laws must be enforced to work. And I know there's big debate across the country where masks are being mandated. And there's discussions around, well, how's that going to be enforced? Because you can put it out there, but if it's not being enforced, people will most likely not comply. There's also taxing of tobacco products as another effective way to reduce youth nicotine initiation and use. Young people are usually price conscious. And again, we are focusing on preventing kids from starting down the path of nicotine addiction. This is a deadly habit that they may never be able to break. And of course, there's flavor bans that are important, but only if they are properly enforced. So what can you do? We talked earlier about the removal of the social circle by raising the age of 18 to 21. Well, I suspect that almost half the students on college campuses are ages 21 to 22, so they are legal age to smoke. And peer pressure and social norm pressures still exist in college, if not, they are heightened in college. So what if you made it harder for smokers to smoke and vapors to vape? Not to mention the need to protect non-users from unwanted inhaling of the harmful byproducts from cigarettes and vaping. So looking into tobacco-free, nicotine-free, smoke-free campus policies is one step that you can take. And I'm going to pass it back to Rob, who's going to go into some more detail about other resources that you can look to make an impact on nicotine addiction. Rob, if you're speaking, I think you're on mute.
No, I'm just waiting for the slide. Okay. There we go. Very, very quickly, I'm going to talk about EVALI and COVID. EVALI, of course, is the illness that happened last year from vaping, THC, and vitamin E, of all things, that took us by surprise. 3,000 people hospitalized, 80 people killed, mostly young people. And a reminder that we don't know what's going to happen with these cigarettes. We've only had them for 5 or 8 years in any quantity. It took us 30 years to know what would happen with cigarettes, but to say that e-cigarettes are safer, that is simply unjustified. And of course, we're in the middle of a respiratory epidemic. And the whole idea of putting something else in your lungs which might irritate them is craziness. Not to mention the fact that, of course, if you're smoking or vaping, you're taking your hand to your mouth all the time. So we often put out this particular thing. This is the time, if you're smoking or vaping, to think about quitting. Finally, I want to give you at least one option for your students who may want to quit. There's no proven way to get college students off with cessation technique. This is mostly a motivation and prevention effort, but the Truth Campaign, funded by the Master Settlement Agreement, Truth, has a system which is activated by mobile phone and which has had some success, and they're just kind of ramping it up now. It's called This Is Quitting. I'd like you to write down these numbers if you get a chance. So if you have kids who are really motivated to quit, this is a particularly valuable idea to consider. So I think we've come up to the end of our time here. I want to remind you that you can take action. The first thing that's important to do is gather data. That survey you saw that we had performed at Ohio State makes a huge difference in informing leadership. If you haven't already got a smoke and vapor-free campus, it's time to initiate that. I think 2/3 of campuses across the United States have embraced that, and your campus should as well. But you have to have a plan. You have to go to leadership with an idea about how you're going to discourage vaping and how you're going to enforce the smoke-free and vapor-free campus. And of course, finally, you have to offer cessation services. But the bottom line is, if you don't do anything, nothing will happen, because nothing changes if nothing changes. Thank you all, and we'll take your questions.
Thank you. We'll just have a few housekeeping slides to review before we take questions, but we welcome all of your questions now. Please submit them in the Q&A box. We have an upcoming open chat virtual cooler taking place July 22nd at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Central Time. You can learn more about this opportunity by visiting our website at hecaod.osu.edu. And we're also excited to announce that the registration for the 2020 virtual national meeting is now open. Although we are unable to meet in person this year, we're excited to bring a virtual conference experience geared for campus professionals working in the field of substance misuse prevention and collegiate recovery. Join other attendees for the opportunity to learn about issues impacting collegiate substance use across the continuum, evidence-based practices, and how to implement them in sustainable and impactful ways, as well as networking opportunities to meet others from across the country. You can register by following the Go link on the screen or by visiting our website at hecaod.osu.edu. And with that, we're going to open it up with questions, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Logan Davis.
Hi there. Our first question comes from Kevin, and is about wording, and specifically thinking about the wording tobacco versus nicotine. It says they think a lot about wording when producing educational campaigns and how a word can easily cause somebody to dismiss it because they don't connect tobacco to vaping or vice versa. What should we say? Tobacco, nicotine, vaping, what recommendations do you have on wording when talking with students or using them for educational campaigns?
This is an incredibly important point. As you can see, our name is Tobacco 21 because we were founded 20 years ago when the idea of vaping didn't even exist. But I think when you're talking to young people in college today, you should dismiss that word. The word should be nicotine. And nicotine products are what they understand. And one of the reasons I spent so much time talking about the real danger of nicotine is that you can emphasize that when you're talking with kids. But nicotine is the issue. It's a nicotine product. When we talk legislatively, we talk about tobacco, but when you're talking to kids, the word is nicotine.
Thank you, Dr. Crane. We had a question come in from Linda. Why were vending machines so important to tobacco companies who sponsored the 21 law in Virginia?
Well, of course, tobacco companies love the idea of having unrestricted sales through a vending machine where no one's watching it. Vending machines have kind of gone away in many states. I didn't realize it was still such an important issue in Virginia. But vending machines are kind of like internet sales, difficult to regulate. No one's watching over them. And so we hope to have both internet sales and vending machines significantly regulated.
And one thing you will see is a lot of vending machines may be exclusive to a casino where you have to be 21 to enter. But hopefully you're not seeing them outside of those age restricted settings.
Thank you so much for answering that question. We had a couple questions come in about COVID, and so we'll just kind of combine them here. And so the question starts out with talking about students and how do you kind of connect the two with vaping and COVID, and then thinking even more specifically, has there made any connection or research with COVID-19 as well as kind of Juul and e-cigarette users and just the use in general?
Yeah, there has been indeed a number of studies now about smokers and COVID. One who smokes and gets COVID has about double or triple the risk of going to the ICU or dying. So clearly you got an irritation in the lung already. And then COVID is not just a viral infection, but a tremendous inflammatory process in the lung. So it puts you at greater risk. I don't think there's data in on vaping, but the E-Valley phenomenon where you had, again, this inflammatory process caused by a small irritant of vitamin E, who would have thought it, caused a number of deaths and 3,000 hospitalizations.
So I think the biggest thing you can tell your students is when you smoke, whether it's vaping or cigarettes, you are damaging your lungs. And when you damage your lungs, it cannot combat against a respiratory disease like COVID-19. And COVID-19 is not going anywhere until a vaccine is created. So we have another year of this unknown. And then the other thing you may hear is, well, it's too late. I've already done the damage. And they have done the damage, but what is it, Rob? Within the first week or two, recovery begins once you quit. So it is never too late to quit. It's never too late to stop smoking. And that's the message you can say to your students, is that damage is being done while you smoke, and it will improve when you stop.
Stop pouring gasoline on the fire.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Could you speak more about evidence-based vaping and smoking cessation and interventions?
Right, this is a tough one. I've served for a long time as one of the strategic committee chairs for our foundation in Ohio, which had a large sum of money from the tobacco settlement to work on both prevention and cessation. And the two groups we had the most difficulty establishing evidence-based cessation efforts were adolescents and pregnant women. And there's virtually no good data out there for cessation efforts from either one. I think for adolescents, it's clear that our approach had to be different. And that's why the Truth Campaign's approach seems to be making headway. But there is no data out there to show that any one thing works better. And there are no medications which are currently FDA approved to use for adolescents under the age of 18. But certainly over 18, you can use nicotine replacement therapies, bupropion and Chantix all work well. But I think this approach with the mobile phone app makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. We've had several more questions come in. I know we're running close to time. So before I ask this next question, I wanted to ask our presenters, do you have 5 extra minutes to stay and answer those questions, or do you prefer to answer those via email and post them with the recording?
We are here for you guys.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to stay around. We understand if those of you have 3 o'clock meetings Eastern time, but we're going to stay and answer these questions. So the next question that I have is about the lack of effectiveness in enforcing smoking and vaping restrictions on campuses. What suggestions do either of you have to go about enforcing those, and maybe what great examples have you seen that are working well?
Right. So we've been through this before with smoke-free indoor air across the country. I helped run it here in Columbus 15 years ago. And what we found, the only thing that was effective was to have peer pressure. If you're in a bar and someone lights up a cigarette, I don't think you have much trouble saying, gee, I wish you wouldn't do that. The same thing is true on campuses. It's a little tougher outside, but certainly vaping indoors, it's not hard to say, look, I don't want those vapor, I don't want that nicotine in my lung. It's kids on campus who speak to each other as young adults. Look, this is not okay. This is something we've agreed not to do, and we appreciate it if you wouldn't do it here.
Perfect, thank you. Are there changes being proposed to the federal ban on flavors to make it apply to puff and future products?
Yes, there are proposals to do that. Unfortunately, you may imagine that the current leadership in the Senate comes from Kentucky and tobacco growing state, and he is unlikely to allow anything to go forward that has any teeth. So I think at least under current legislative makeup in the Senate and at the administrative presidency level, we're not likely to see any real changes.
As someone who was born in the state of Kentucky, that makes me sad. But we will go to the next question. Can the disposable vaporizers, be manipulated to allow for vaping THC or other cannabis products?
That is a really good question. The answer is yes. Of young people who use THC, a little less than half use it through a vaporizer. It's usually taking a jewel pod or a puff bar, kind of opening it, simply snapping off part of it and filling it up with a THC product. That's, of course, what happened with the EVALI problem. They took Juul things and mixed them in, or use a regular canister vapor thing to inhale. The problem is that many THC products are not regulated, and vaping them is at your own risk.
Thanks so much, Dr. Crane. We had a question while you were answering that one come in about cannabis and vaping specifically. Was there anything else you would like to add there? Just a connection between the two about cannabis vaping and that phenomenon that we're seeing.
Yeah, they are highly related. And of course, we know that cannabis is a big issue nowadays, and you can look at the states where cannabis has been legal for a long time, and what's happening to youth rates going up and up. Oregon and Vermont being the two top leaders in youth cannabis usage. And whereas adults may be able to get by using cannabis every so often without much problem, we know that just like nicotine, early exposure to the young brain of high doses of THC is quite deleterious. It's a neurotoxin for young brains, and obviously to be discouraged.
Dr. Crane, this question's for you regarding nicotine and dosage. You spoke about vaping versus cigs in terms of amount of nicotine. What about mode of administration? It takes longer to smoke a cig versus ongoing repeated use of a vaping device.
Yeah, if you look at Juul, actually, when they applied for FDA regulation, they put out their numbers, and you can see that Juul, with their very high dose, can come within about 20 percentage points of the dose of nicotine given by a cigarette. But as I pointed out, Juul, because they're using a nicotine salt, comes up more slowly. The Marlboro, which is the progenitor of a fast delivery nicotine item, hits really hard, really fast. And it's that pump that I think makes it stand out. Juul is going to give you a big dose of nicotine, but a little more slowly, a little more evenly. Still very addictive.
Our last question is for both of you and comes from Matt, who's been watching today. And he says, what messaging have you found or encountered that resonates with 17 to 22-year-olds to connect vaping with the risks that are associated with COVID-19?
Right, Amanda.
Yeah, I think it just goes back to reminding them that when you inhale anything into your lungs, whether it be vaping, cigarettes, even cannabis, that you are damaging your lungs. And we are in the midst of a respiratory pandemic. So if you're damaging your lungs, you're not arming them to keep yourself safe from ending up in the ICU and having massive issues with COVID-19. And I think the problem is that generation is overly confident in so many ways. They're not going to be addicted. They're not going to get COVID. They're going to be fine. You know, they're superheroes, but they're not. So I think just reminding them that it doesn't matter how healthy you are, that you are damaging your lungs, and we have to keep our lungs safe and at all times, but especially now during a respiratory pandemic. And it is not too late to quit.
Yeah, and a reminder that your lungs are very delicate tissues, and whereas your GI tract has an exit strategy for toxins and other things, the lungs don't have that. What goes in and sticks there stays in and irritates.
So I hate to say it, but I was made a liar. We had a really good question come in about nicotine content on the Puff Bar as compared to the Juul, and I wanted to give you a minute to answer that. And this will be our last question, and then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah, I think I haven't looked at this recently, but I think Puff Bar is right up there with Juul. I don't believe that Puff Bars have, Juul has different levels that you can purchase and different levels that are available in, say, in England versus here. but I think Puff Bar is one dose, and I believe it is very comparable to Juul, and they are a nicotine salt delivery device.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Crane and Amanda, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us and staying after to answer all of these questions. We greatly appreciate it. And I just wanted to let everyone to know that the recording as well as the slides today are going to be made available on our website within 4 business days. And then so they will be on the website hec.aod.osu.edu, as you can see on the screen. Thank you so much for attending, and that is all for today. We greatly appreciate your time.
Thank
Anthony
you so
Logan,
much.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Rob or myself. And if you're looking to take action in your communities, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to help.
Tobacco21.org.